There is a way of participating in the electoral process that has been problematic over the course of the last, maybe since the beginning of time, actually. And it is the doctrine of what I call head in the sand backers. And this is kind of similar to the Trump cult, but it goes, it crosses party lines. Effectively, it means that you will have people who, no matter how proven the person that they call themselves liking um, is found to be corrupt or have positions that don't align with what they publicly stated, they will find themselves irrationally still trying to defend and back that person in spite of the fact that you brought up things which are diametrically opposed to what they consider to be their own views. A good example of this is that during the campaign trail, Trump spoke out against I believe it was the war in Afghanistan, it was that or Iraq. And this person said, "Oh yeah, I'm anti-war." This supporter of his, I remember, he was saying that he liked Trump because he thought Trump was also anti-war. So after Trump keeps the war going for now over a year, they say, "Oh well, I wasn't for a an immediate withdrawal, even though we've been over there for 17 years." So you ask yourself, when is that withdrawal coming? But nonetheless, a case example of a person who doesn't like something that Trump is doing, but now has to amend their views to still rationalize and reason to themselves why they're backing this person. And we can go down the list. They opposed the transgender military ban. They were again, just anything that had to do with his social policy or climate change. It was dumb to them. Paris Agreement, um, Iran nuclear deal, all of these things they found themselves disagreeing with him with in terms of what his administration was doing, and yet for some reason they couldn't bring themselves to say, "This is not what I voted for. This is diametrically opposed to what I wanted." And I know it's a load of trash, even though he claims the opposite. So I'm no longer going to back this person. They couldn't do it. They refused to have the wherewithal to say, I was a supporter of yours, but I am not a fanatic. I'm done with you." And that's something that a number of people have for people of both parties. Case in point, I had an Obama supporter who voted for him back in 2008. Now he ran a campaign of being opposed to the wars, the peace candidates for seemingly. Fast forward 8 years later, he gets us into 5 more wars, and the person I spoke with who calls himself being a fan of his is anti-conflict again, and yet found themselves still not being able to separate themselves from his perspective. Um, and certainly when I mentioned the surveillance state and other things he had done that kept in place what was implemented by Bush, their response was, "Well, I just have an opinion." And so when you throw out your opinion and that is the sum total of why you make your argument, it is effectively your way of saying, "I have no way of combating what you just said. I have no reason to really like this person other than for nostalgia." And now that they've been proven to be this corrupt figure, I'm going to irrationally think that they're still good because I don't want to accept I got duped not once but twice. These voters, a lot of times when we sit there and we talk about people's lack of intelligence, but if you sit them down and you talk with them, most of the time they're able to get what positions they like, what positions they think are, in the best interest of the US, and it's typically not being reflected by either of these major parties. But what happens is that because we live in an era where people find themselves being more attracted to politicians as people rather than as lawmakers and those who create the various rules that govern our system, they refuse to accept that these people can be bought, and that in many cases the people they voted for were bought. And look, I don't. I've tried to say before. I think I don't have this because, for example, I like Bernie. If he goes around and starts being pro-war and talking about free college could never happen, there goes my interest in that candidate. It's as simple as that. You don't get to have a unlimited backseat stage to my never-ending defense if you don't stand up for positions that you at one point held or that I think are in my own interest. So really, I just want people to recognize the difference between them and those that can actually be told things. Because when I was sitting here talking about the Senate primary that was 2 days ago, I was trying to explain that while there is a group of people who just don't know who certain candidates are because of media corruption and all of that, you also have some people who genuinely think these individuals that are openly corrupt do things for them, and they find themselves not being able to really defend the record, but just telling you, well, this party's better because of this one or other two things, and sure enough, it's being reflected in the general. Pick between Feinstein and De Leon, and you have a real choice. It's a very small choice, but there's some slight difference between the two. Instead of radical change that can happen if you get people to know what all their options are. Um, I really despise the fact that so often it seems when we get disillusioned after not getting the results we want in elections, we just write off a whole population as being opposed to their best interest. But then we go and look and we find out that only half the people who could vote voted, or even lower number than that. And we realize that a good chunk of those people just are disillusioned with the system. And when you reach out to these people with a approach of getting them to register to either back your campaign or that of other people who they think are inspiring and actually can be proven to not be corrupt, you're going to have better results. But you're always going to have those individuals who will fight you tooth and nail um, to support policies which have been shown to do them a disservice, and people who throughout their tenures have been proven to owe them nothing for their vote, because they are owing their donors for their financial backing. So I'd like to think this was explanatory.